This disclaimer was copied without permission. Let me just warn you right away. This one is going to be a serious one. Cheers, Squaffers, Goslers, Wiggers, Sippers and all other good people out there. Hopswatch here. First up, I want to warn anyone watching that this video will contain some truly disturbing content. I'm not being funny, I'm not being ironic here, I'm not being sarcastic. No matter what, don't say you weren't warned beforehand. We are dealing with Torben Søndergaard and the Last Reformation again. And this time, I'll be looking at some of the real harm that he and his cult has done to some of the most vulnerable people in society that you can think of. The children. First, a quick resume to get new viewers up to date on what I'm talking about. Torben Søndergaard is a Danish charismatic preacher that is leading a large worldwide cult called the Last Reformation. In January of 2019, a documentary on nationwide Danish television exposed Torben Søndergaard's cult practices, faith healing, exorcism, baptism and so on as harmful and fraudulent. After the documentary, because of bad publicity and disputes with his landlord Peter Rasmussen, he gave up the cult compound near Thisted, Denmark and moved to the United States. In the month of June, he sought asylum because of a new Danish law against mental violence that he claimed was directed against him personally, which it really wasn't. Big surprise. Recently, he rented a hotel resort in North Carolina to make it become a new center for his cult activities, a new cult compound if you like. It is located in a wooden area near Connolly Springs. Now, Torben's cult is heavily centered around practices such as faith healing, exorcism, baptizing by submerging the whole body into water, and speaking in tongues. And it is practices like these that the children in Torben Søndergaard's Last Reformation cult are subjected to. Though Torben claims in the aforementioned documentary God's Best Children that he doesn't perform exorcism on children. However, footage from the Last Reformation's own YouTube channel show otherwise. For example, this is Torben doing exorcism on a child in the Netherlands. This is Torben doing exorcism on a child in Brazil. This is Torben doing exorcism on a child in Australia. Also, children are exposed to the sight and sounds of adults being exorcised. Like, for example, this. I have already told the story about Ida in an earlier video. Ida was a mentally handicapped young woman who, on false promises of being cured of her handicap, was lured into the Last Reformation cult. And there she was exposed to exorcism and faith healing in a session she described as rape, and as a result she was committed to a mental institution with 24-hour surveillance, deeply psychotic and traumatized. And she'll quite possibly be there for the rest of her life. Also in the documentary, a similar case is described where an anonymous relative to a member of the Last Reformation cult tells how the member, a young woman, has become increasingly mentally ill after entering the cult. Now, if practices like these ruin the lives of adults, how much more couldn't they completely ruin the lives of children? So I found one article that summarized pretty much all of the research that has been done into the negative effects of various kinds of religious rituals on children. The article is named "In the Name of God, a Profile of Religion-Related Child Abuse" and is from the Department of Psychology at the University of Illinois at Chicago. The authors are Betty L. Bottoms from the University of Illinois at Chicago, and it is co-written by Philip R. Shaver, Gail S. Goodman and Janjan Chin, which I probably botched completely, from the University of California, Davis. The article splits up religious-related child abuse into 3 categories, which are withholding medical care, exposure to rid of evil rituals, which would be such as faith healing and exorcism, which we are dealing with here, and abuse perpetrated by people of authority, such as ministers and priests. You might have guessed it, that is mostly sexual abuse, of which there is no evidence of it going on in the Last Reformation, I might add. So the article summarizes that child victims of rituals, such as the ones practiced by the Last Reformation especially, were shown to be the most violent physically abused group of victims. And the children exposed to those rituals later in life showed symptoms of acting out aggressively on a larger scale than any of the other categories examined, while also suffering from depression like the other religiously abused children in the material did. Over a third of the victims of the rid of evil type of ritual abuse had considered suicide, while this was only the case in about 20% of the victims of sexual abuse. Also, personality and dissociative orders were seen in 20% of the victims of the rid of evil ritual abuse, and these were higher figures than in the other categories. So scholars in the field of psychology seem to agree the types of rituals that Torben and his followers are performing on these children are indeed harmful. Now, in the documentary, a number of professionals testify in concordance to these findings. There is, for example, Bente Boserup. She's a senior consultant at Børns Vilkår, that means conditions of children, and she criticizes vehemently that children are present while the often violent exorcisms are taking place. Also, the examples that I showed you earlier are presented to her, and her judgment is clear. The children are deeply uncomfortable, they are being manipulated, they are being physically constrained, and the only way they can make the unpleasantries stop is by playing along. However, it doesn't stop with Torben Søndergaard. His church, movement, cult, whatever you want to call it, is built up on teaching the ideology and ritual practices of the church to as many people as possible, as quickly as possible, in the highest number of places possible. So this movement has already spread all over the friggin' world, and sometimes with some absolutely awful consequences. There's the case of Robert Shaw, who was trained at one of Torben's Jesus centers in Denmark, that are now all closed, thank goodness. With Torben's ideology and rituals in the luggage, he went to Indonesia, where he took over the Paracletus Ecclesia orphanage. And the children there were afterwards exposed to the same rituals, faith healing and violent exorcisms and baptizing fully submerged in water, flailing and screaming and speaking in tongues like is expected in the cult. So however goofy and weirdly lovable Torben Søndergaard may seem, he's still a leader of a dangerous cult that does irreparable damage to many people, and in part to some of the most vulnerable people you can think of. No child is comfortable with practices like these. No child needs faith healing for anything. Basically, what faith healing does is that it gives the suggestion, the illusion that you are being helped with some issues. And I mean, doing this to adults in itself is absolutely awful. So to say, persuading people into believing that a faith healing ritual will cure you of cancer or any mental illness, stuff like that, is not only fraudulent, it's dangerous. There are so many examples of people quitting their medication after being faith healed because they actually believe that they are now cured of whatever issue ails them. And of course, it's even worse with children. Many of these children wouldn't even know what's going on. Many of these children wouldn't even know that this is done to them to cure them of any ailment or anything like that. So even giving children the illusion of getting cured of something, it's even worse, because children are even less capable of understanding the fraud that is happening, the way that adult people are taking advantage of them when they are exposed to this kind of fraudulent treatment. And in cases where they don't understand that these rituals are there to quote unquote help them, they will only see it as an added inconvenience in whatever ailment they have. The faith healing comes in besides all the other suffering that is going on. They also have to endure these weird people that are screaming and flailing and saying weird things. I'm thinking of the speaking in tongues, as Tom calls it. The proper word for it is glossolalia, but of course he doesn't know that. Yeah, well, I'm going a bit on a tangent here. I really need a drink now, and that'll be all for this time. Like, subscribe if you like what I do, and there are links to all my social media in the description, of course. I'll be having an IPA. An organic one that I haven't tried before, but I'm not going to review it now. Just going to enjoy it after getting a video done that I should have done long ago. But it really wears on me to have to look at these things so thoroughly that I have needed to do this time. Yes, so that'll be all for this time, and always remember to drink responsibly. Even when you have watched stuff like this. Cheers. First, a quick resume to get new viewers up to date on what I'm talking about. So, Torben Søndergaard is a Danish Søndergaard, wonderful.